so. Comp van racing the garrison for us.
That's nice.
What price did you negotiate?
Yeah.
Free.
That's rather nice.
He's been holding off.
Hello everyone, welcome to another card video. My name is Koren Wiskman, and today I'm playing with some Say It With Stamps stamps. I'm part of the Say It With Stamps design team. I love their stamps. So I get to be part of their design team. Today I'm playing with Dino Friends, the stamp set. Any kind of Dino stamp set goes over really well in this house. Okay? Really well. I have here the Dino Friends stamp set from Say It With Stamps. It is super cute. I love the sentiments. We are going to use Party like there's no tomorrow on today's card, plus these really super cute, adorable dinosaur images. Coordinating dies are available for that set if you're interested. We're also going to use the Party die because it's awesome. We're not going to use the stamp set, but there is a fun stamp set that kind of coordinates with it if you are interested in that. Then we're going to also use Pebbles, Grass, and Clouds stencils. These are larger than normal stencils for me. They're 6x8 or slimline type stencils. We're going to make an A2 size card today, and I'm using this diorama die from Stampin' Up! Just to create an aperture, a hole in the front of my card. This is my card panel. It's cut to 3.5 by 4 3/4. I like to create with card panels of that size because it leaves a nice border on my card base. We're going to enhance this panel just a little bit with this Pebbles stencil. First, we're going to emboss it. I know, I'm putting this stencil, securing it from the back side because we're going to emboss it and then we're going to also ink blend on it. So I secured it in place. I ran it through my die cutting machine. Everyone's die cutting machine is different, so I encourage you to check the manufacturer's instructions or to play around with it. I run mine through like a regular die sandwich. We're going to use Distress Oxide and Twisted Citron to enhance it even further. First, I'm going around the outside of this panel with my Nuvo blender brush. It's a stencil brush. It gives a light coating of ink. This ink has pigment ink type properties which sit on top of the paper, so that's why it's fun to use for this type of technique. I want a little bit heavier ink on the outside edges of my card panel, so I'm going back in with the same ink but a brush that gives a little bit more ink, a little bit more coverage. So this is the big reveal. I think it looks so fabulous. It has a little bit of embossing and the ink blending. It makes it look super dinosaur skin. Don't you think? I think it does. That's what I was going for anyway, dinosaur skin. We have another card panel here. This is cut to the exact same size, but it is a heavyweight white cardstock. And I'm just ink blending some clouds for a background to live behind the hole in the front of my card. I'm using some thistle or some pale lavender type of ink to add these clouds to the background. To be exact, it is Flirty, Fuchsia, and Pixie Dust that I used by Catherine Pooler. I love these types of stencils because even though it's just one row, it's one long row of clouds, you can get different looks by using the ends or by flipping it around, and that way you can get a good variety of clouds for your background, all from just the one stencil. I'm not spending a whole lot of time here because this is not the focal point of the card. This is the background of the card. And it's not a very complicated thing, and you're not really going to see a whole lot of it. It's just to add a little bit of color, a little bit of interest, and to set the scene for our dinos. I'm doing the same exact thing for the grass. I'm cutting it out. I'm just fussy cutting. I'm going to fussy cut it and pop it up on my card front to just give it a little bit of interest. And it doesn't matter how you do this. Look, it looks like a landscape, and I really just didn't spend any time on that. I'm going to stamp my images today with Rangel Archival Jet Black because I'm going to do a faux watercoloring technique. I like to call it faux. I'm actually using water this time, which is a good thing. I'm stamping them onto Arteza watercolor paper pad. I got this from Amazon. And I really like this paper, and it's not real expensive. I'm using my Inktense pencils. I put down a little bit of color in the darkest areas of my image, and then I draw it out with a water brush, either a water brush or a blender pen of some kind. Today I have something pretty unique and a little weird, so I'm going to explain it to you. I like using a marker. It feels good in my hand, but when I'm with my pencils, you don't really use markers with pencils a whole lot, right? Well, I got the idea to make myself a water brush using an empty Copic marker. And that's what this is. It's an empty Copic marker. You can buy them. And I filled it with water instead of ink. This is good and a good idea for me because I like coloring with this technique, and I destroy a lot of markers because watercolor paper is very textured. The nibs get really destroyed very easily. So I wanted a cheap way to recover my water brush. I say cheap because it's cheaper. It's actually the cheapest way that I've found to do this, because you buy a pack of Copic nibs for, like, let's say $7, and then you get 3 nibs in that pack. That's like getting 3 blender brushes, right? Blender markers with water or water brushes to use for, whatever 7 divided by 3 is. I don't do the maths. I was unsure of how the water was going to dispense from the marker because it's less viscous than ink, okay? So I was wondering, like, how the ink, would it drip out? And it kind of did at first, but now it's working like perfect. It is the best water brush I've ever used, and I love it. Once my images were all colored up, I cut them out with the coordinating dies, also available from Say It with Stamps. In addition to the 2 Dino images, I also stamped and colored several of the palm images and even the little plant image, also with the same watercoloring technique, or faux watercoloring technique. For the sentiment, it's going to say party like there's no tomorrow. So I'm going to cut this party word die out from this heavyweight cardstock 4 times. I like to layer my sentiments. I like to make them chunky. This one kind of needs to be a little sturdy because we're going to use some fun embossing powder to color the word die. This is one of those things that is super boring to watch, but it's part of how I made the card, so I have to include it. But yeah, I'm just gluing these pieces together. There are lots of techniques on how to do this. Some designers like to spray adhesive on there. I have that. But it really depends on my mood. And today we just use some liquid adhesive. To color this word die, I'm going to use this mixed media powder. It's from Ranger. It's basically mixed powder in different colors. This one has a little bit of black, a little bit of silver, a little bit of green. It's called Lime. I'm coating the word die with some Watermark ink, just sticky ink all over the front. Don't even have to be nice to it because we're going to completely coat it with this embossing powder. This is where the sturdiness really is good. It's a good value. Shake off a little bit of the excess, but honestly, I embossed this twice to get a really, really good coating of this embossing powder on there, and it's really worth it. It's chunkier than regular embossing powder, so you can see it melt and kind of meld together in the different colors. It just looks really cool. I'm a big fan. I like to use it on my card projects. This is one of my favorite ways of using it. I thought the green was a good enhancement for our card. Now I'm making this sub-sentiment, and it's going to say, like there's no tomorrow, except for on the stamp, those are on 2 separate lines. So you could cut your stamp apart, which I have done in the past. But no, I decided that I was just going to line them up and stamp them separately. I also want to heat emboss them, but I also want them to be black. So I stamp them with a black pigment ink. Need to make sure that only the word that you want to show is being stamped at that time. So you mask all the other words and just stamp the words that you want to use. I did this several times because it's a lot harder than you think it is. Once I've stamped it in the black pigment ink, I used clear embossing powder to emboss the sentiment. I stamped it on a lavender cardstock because I thought that was the best color that coordinated with the scene that we had going on. Once I have the first part of the sentiment stamped and embossed, I load it right back into my MISTI, and this really helped. Okay, Simon Says Stamp has a transparency sheet with a grid on it, pre-printed on it, and you could also make one of these at home. I used those grid lines to help me kind of line up the sentiment, and that really helped me get it straight so that it didn't look too wonky. It also helps to use the transparency when I'm re-stamping a dirty stamp, because I make a mess. I do. I'm messy. And when I'm doing this technique, I tend to make a mess. So when I use the transparency to align the next portion of the stamp, it helps keep my card front clean. My ultimate goal was to make it say, "Like there's no tomorrow," all in one line so that I can cut it out in one strip and place it under the party word die that we just created. Now, I wouldn't look too hard at it or anything, but it's pretty straight. It is straight enough for our beautiful handmade greeting card, right? Now we just need to cut it into a strip, and we will have achieved my goal of cutting it into a strip that says, "Like there's no tomorrow." So this is how I've been doing it. This is a tonic mini guillotine, and I've been kind of lining up the sentiment based on the plastic handle and making the strip that way. And that's really been kind of working out for me. Now, granted, I don't care if it's really perfectly straight. So if you care that it's perfectly straight, maybe not work on my technique. Maybe work on a different perfectly straight technique. I have all of my parts and pieces. I'm popping up that grassy landscape with some foam squares. Then we're going to pop up our reptile dino skin piece in front of that. I'm using Scrapbook Adhesives foam squares. They have a thick and a thin version. I use them both on my cards, but I think when I reach for a lot of dimension, I go for the thin ones just so that I don't make it super bulky. Don't get me wrong, I'm not afraid of super bulky. I just don't want to pay for super bulky. So those cards will generally get hand delivered, and I'm okay with that. The background is assembled. Now we're going to stick on our images. This is a birthday card. I like to write on the inside of my cards, so I typically don't usually stamp in them unless it's like an additional sentiment. I don't really decorate them because I enjoy handwriting notes to whoever the recipient is. Even if I plan on letting them use the card again, I will handwrite a note on a Post-it and stick it on the inside, leaving the inside blank for them to write in it if they so choose to. The party word die is adhered with liquid adhesive on the two sides and then stuck on the palms. The palms are kind of holding it up. Per usual, I stuck my card panel on a light gray card base. I love how this card turned out. It is super cute. To find more information about the products used on this card, you can check the description box below. I absolutely love interacting with you on social media, so find me and find PhotoPlay Paper on social media.